Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Voters in Nagaland and Meghalaya exercise their franchisee in the assembly election. The results will be declared on the 3rd of March. A very good evening to you and thank you very much for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Kritika Saxena. Ronajai Banerjee joins me from the Delhi studio. But let's get straight to the big development in the PNB fraud case. Nirav Modi's flagship international jewelry firm Firestar Diamond has filed for bankruptcy in the United States. Now, the company's diamond business is spread across the United States, Europe, Middle East, as well as East Asia. Now, in its bankruptcy filing, the company has blamed liquidity and supply chain challenges for the crisis that it is facing currently. But what does this exactly mean for the company and for Nirav Modi in India? To discuss this further, we are now joined by Alok Dheer. He is the founding director of Dheer & Dheer Associates. Mr. Dheer, to put this into perspective, we understand that there isn't going to be as much of an impact of the US bankruptcy filing on the legal recourse taken by agencies over here. But what, in a sense, does the impact be? What will the impact be on India per se?
I think it's a very complex question. Nirav Modi has, as the reports say, filed a bankruptcy under Section 11A of 11 of the US Code in the case of Firestar Diamonds Inc. And he has been claiming in the various newspapers over the last few days, we notice that Firestar has nothing to do with any of the businesses which he has been operating in India. In that sense, there is an isolated filing in Chapter 11 in the US as against whatever processes are being carried on in India. Now, we don't have in India what is called a cross-border bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So the two processes will run pretty independent of each other. However, we noticed that much of the funds which were moved from out of India have actually gone into foreign companies in jurisdictions across the board. Ultimately, investigations will show whether any of that money has finally found its way into Firestar. We can't say for now. And in case there are civil contracts which have been woven around the transfers of money, the amounts will be recoverable by civil processes by filing recovery suits and processes in US. But if there is any fraud which is involved, it is possible then to use the processes of law to try to bring that money back.
But Mr. Dheer, could at any point, depending upon how the process goes through in US, could at any point Nirav Modi's lawyers use this to soften the stance over here when they are arguing the case against agencies? That's one. And the other point I wanted to understand is a lot of people are seeing this as Nirav Modi is essentially hiding in the US. Is he basically trying to clear out all the legal processes over there so that he doesn't have to come back over here?
See, clearly, this will blunt some of the recoveries that we are intending to make. I do not know whether this is an isolated filing or various other companies which Nirav Modi has across Europe and US will file for bankruptcy in those countries. The impact will be that the money which has gone from India for payment of various, which we believe are associate companies of Nirav Modi, if all of them finally go into bankruptcy, there's nothing left to recover. So it could be a strategy to blunt the recoveries of money from the monies which have flown from Indian banks into the foreign companies. It's a little too early for us to say, but ultimately investigations will reveal what the real intent is. As of now, he's entitled to claim, as has been said, that Firestone in itself is bankrupt. They have asset base of 50 million, they have liabilities of 100 million, and under a fiduciary responsibility as a director, he is obligated to, as soon as he finds that the company is financially distressed and is unable to pay its debts, he is obliged to file for Section 11, for Chapter 11.
Absolutely,
to bring it to the notice of the creditors that he has lost viability.
But Mr. Dheer, how do you expect this to play out in the coming months? Because, you know, the insolvency proceedings in the US is very different from the insolvency proceedings here in India, where in India there is a clear time limit between 180 days to 270 days. The matter needs to be disposed of. But in case of the US, to the best of my knowledge, there is no time limit per se. The creditors can seek as much time as they want till the time there is consensus. So how do you see this playing out?
The timelines will certainly not match. As far as we can see, the process is already commenced in US. And as you very rightly mentioned, the creditors can, with the consent of the creditors, the timeline for the restructuring, we call it reorganization in the US, will go on. On the other hand, in India, the process, if at all it commences, as of now, no proceeding under IBC has commenced in case of Nirav Modi or his group companies. As and when that process kicks in, it will have that 180 to 70 days and it will go into liquidation. Another important factor is that in the US Chapter 11, it is a debtor in possession. So Nirav Modi continues to be in possession and will continue to operate the company Firestar, of course under the US trustee. If there is any fraud that the creditors point out, or if there is any specific dispensation which is required, the US trustee steps in. However, in India, the creditors will take possession of all the operations of the businesses. So the two, to my mind, at this point of time, will run completely independent of each other.
Ms. Dheer, I want to go back to a point that you made, which is rather important. You said at the face of it, there is, that there is no necessarily correlation between what's happening in India and what's happening over there, because India does not have the cross-border insolvency proceedings, the ruling. But given the fact that, as you said, if the investigation agencies here in India can establish the fact that money fraudulently flowed from an Indian entity to an entity, let's just say in this case, Firestar, because that is the company we're talking about, then you're saying there is legal recourse for us to then sort of seek the money back into India.
It's a very complex issue and it can't be so simplistically answered. But obviously, if there's, as I said earlier, if there are contractual agreements binding the flow of the money, and the money has flown into any company in the US and perhaps Firestar on the basis of contracts, then obviously all the assets will have to be put in one pack, and then on the other side all the creditors will vote by ballot and decide who is to get what share. And therefore that is the only restricted amount which is possible that can come to India under the code. However, if it's a case of fraud, then there are processes which are open, which are both criminal, and monies can be sought to be brought back into India, claiming that these have been fraudulently taken. So they are not going to be treated purely as civil payments or contracts which have been executed, and therefore falling directly for proportionate payment in terms of a reorganization plan that is put in place in Chapter 11. But having said that, it's exceedingly complex.
Alok, thank you very much. We'll have you.
There's a lot of investigative.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a multifaceted issue, but Alok, appreciate you joining us and explaining it to us simply for the benefit of our viewers what this really means, whether this has any correlation and what the bearing of this could be as far as the PNB fraud case back home is concerned. Alok, appreciate you joining us on India Business Hour. But staying with the PNB fraud case, more skeletons have tumbled out of PNB's closet. Earlier today, the public sector bank has now revealed a further 1,300 crore rupees of unauthorized transactions. In a notice to the exchanges last evening, the bank has said that the quantum of unauthorized transactions could now go up to over 12,700 crore rupees. So that's over $2 billion that we are talking about. Meanwhile, Dalal Street punished the PNB stock yet again after the announcement of fresh addition to the estimated cost of fraud. The stock ended the day down around 13%, hitting the sub 100 rupees mark for the first time in over a year and a half. Nigel D'Souza now joins it with more on how the stock fared since the detection of Nirav Modi fraud. Nigel, all yours.
Well, PNB has been getting hit on a day-to-day basis, and today the stock was sub 100 rupees for the first time in the last 21 months or so. Importantly, if you're just tracking the stock move, remember post the entire banking recap, the stock had gone all the way to around 230 odd. After that, there was some money taken off the table because there was a QIP that was issued at around 176. those QIP holders would have been quite happy, but only till Republic Day, because as one day before Republic Day, the stock had moved towards 197 rupees. But today, in fact, the close below 100 rupees was far from satisfying. If you're tracking the stock move and depending on your entry point, then we should get the percentage of the move of the stock. So, if you bought it post that bank recap day, you would be down nearly around 57%. If you were applied in the QIP, then you're down more than 40%. And if in fact even one day ahead of Republic Day, if you bought it on Jan 25th, then the stock has lost 50% of its market capitalization. Remember, if you bought it one day ahead of Valentine's Day, that was on February 12th, because 13th the stock market was shut, then it was down nearly around 39% from Feb 12th, and that's the date when in fact we are attributing the start of the scam and the start of the erosion in terms of the stock price. The current market capitalization is less than 24,000 crores, and if you take a look at what was the market capitalization on Jan 25th, it was nearly 47,000 crores. So it's lost half of its market capitalization from Jan 25th. Let's stack up a couple of numbers then. What is the estimated, scam value that we're working with, at least as of now? 13,000 crores. What is the market capitalization destruction? Well, that's more than what the scam value. So equity shareholders, they have got hit harder than even the total scam value. And to stack few numbers up for you, the current market cap is sub 24,000 crores. The net worth is 49,000 crores. So you'll say the stock is trading at half a time price to book. But that's not the case, because the estimated cost of the fraud as of now is nearly around 13,000 crores, and that is nearly around 25% of the current net worth. So the fear is, what if that gets wiped away from the net worth? Then that half-time price to book value, that goes out of the window, because it becomes a tad bit more expensive. Finally, you're known by, the company you keep. So yes, PNB stock has got hit from February 12th, but just take a look at some of these other PSU banking stocks. They have got whacked. All in all, it's seen big erosion in the last month, in the last 15 days. Post the Nirav Modi scam breaking out, this stock has been under pressure, sub 100 rupees for the first time in over 20 months.
Okay, Nigel, thanks for putting that into perspective. The stock, of course, will be very closely watched. But here's the other big story related to this. In the wake of the PNB fraud, the government has sent a missive to public sector lenders. The North Block has instructed PSU banks to probe all NPA accounts over 50 crore rupees for possible fraud. The announcement was made by the Financial Services Secretary on Twitter. Sapna Das is here to put this into perspective. Sapna, the rules are obviously getting more stricter now for Indian banks, but I would expect that this would just be the phase one.
Well, as a fallout of the Nirav Modi scam, the government clearly is fixing the responsibility of the top brass of public sector banks, and basically on that account, two clear directions that have come out. One, of course, all public sector banks will have to look into all those NP accounts of 50 crores and above, and kind of find out if any frauds have been committed within them. That's one. Second, if there is any evidence of fraud which surfaces within these accounts, and that is 50 crore and above NPA accounts, they're supposed to promptly file an FIR with the CBI or probably even the ED and DRI, whichever the concerned investigative agency is. So this is a very clear directive that has come in from the government. Apart from this, they have also gone ahead and set up a panel consisting of, or rather comprising of, the executive directors of all public sector banks as well as the chief technology officers to come together and give the recommendations in 15 days on how the IT platforms, or rather the technology platforms of all the banks, should be tightened further. More important, how there should be a common operating procedure for all the banks on this front, so that scams like Nirav Modi are they don't actually go undetected, or rather there is no eventuality of they happening in the future. So on both accounts, of course, the strong advisory in terms of checking frauds within the 50 crore NP account, that's a pretty stringent one, and also in terms of setting up the tech panel, that is also equally important. Apart from this, we also understand the buck doesn't stop here. A series of measures the government has been taking right since this scam has started or has come to light. The next one that we get to hear is that probably the auditing system in the public sector banks is bound to get tightened, and we should be hearing soon from the government quarters on this front as well.
Okay, Sapna, we'll wait to get some clarity on that. Thank you for joining in with that. But let's go across to Ritu Singh now, who has two special guests with her to discuss this development and the implications on the entire public sector bank area. Ritu.
To discuss further the government's framework for timely detection, reporting and investigation of frauds to the public sector banks, joining us now are former Banking Secretary Mr. D.K. Mittal, as well as the head of the Indian Banks Association, Mr. V.G. Kannan. Thank you, both of you gentlemen, for joining us on the show here. But, first up, let me start with you, Mr. Mittal. What do you make of this framework that has been outlined by the government? I'll give you a few key highlights. To start with, there will be prompt fraud identification and action within prescribed timelines. The Central Vigilance Office will vet complaints and coordinate with the CBI for frauds that exceed 50 crore rupees. All NPA cases of over 50 crore rupees will have to be examined for fraud, and the reported frauds will then have to be examined for willful defaults. Your first reaction to this, Mr. Mittal?
The first priority of any financial institution would be that the fraud should not take place, and there should be appropriate framework for that. In fact, there have to be multiple layers of framework for that. So that is something which needs to be first put in place, which is not there. The second part is, in case of any fraud is detected at any level, first priority has to be recovery of money, not to identify criminals and send them to jail. That should be the last priority. Because as a financial institution, I want my money back. Let those who have done mistake or error, deliberate, indeliberate, they should be punished later on. And the third part, which is related to first part, the prevention measure, there has to be back-end audit system which IT systems can give us. There could be many frauds which could be detected by the IT systems if we have back-end audit happening on a real-time basis, which throws up any alarm signals. So I think we do not have that system in place, and that has to be the first priority. Okay. And the second priority has to be recovery of money, and the third priority is what to do with those who have done any crime.
Mr. Mittal, we also have Mr. Kannan, who represents the banking side of this. Now, Mr. Kannan, tell us, until now, of course, banks do have an early warning system in place. They also have RBI's guidelines on frauds and detection of early fraud and the action to be taken thereafter. What was the need for such a notification?
I think if you actually go through the notification, it is sort of a reiteration of the earlier circular of 2015. Stating that banks should ensure that the processes are there. And they have probably added a couple of steps saying that the CVO should be on top of it, and he should be in a position to confirm whatever the suspicion of a fraud. And I would also say that, normally the bankers are the first ones to, the moment they come to know that there's a fraud which has been at least apparently very clear, they report the matter to the CBI or to the RBI, as the case may be. And in both cases, however, we do make efforts to recover the money. Here, they have only put in place certain procedures, especially the CBO to come in picture. And they have also said that you can, if you want, as a preventive measure where you have suspicion, to involve the DR and CBI in case of any requirement. So I think it's slightly involving outside agencies also, rather than only on the prima facie what we find. We do also use the services of external agencies in case we find that there is a possibility of fraud. And in case we find that the fraud has been apparent, we actually report the matter. So I think it is more of a reiteration of the existing circular, and to ensure that systems are in place to identify possible trends where there could be a fraud.
Do you think the thinking behind this is also that there could be a serious under-reporting of fraud at the moment by banks, despite various regulations and guidelines by RBI being in place? Mr. Kannan, if you could go first, and Mr. Mittal, if you could also add your comments.
Yes, I'll tell you one thing is, almost in all the transactions, the bank always looks at what is the intention of the borrower, whether there's a malified intention, which could be proven where he has given either a wrong invoice, a fraudulent invoice, or he has diverted the money. And intentionally, where we can easily prove that point, we always classify as frauds. I'm surprised to note that there are many frauds which you say has not been reported, but quite a good number of frauds are being reported on a regular basis. And some of them are from the advances area, where you find that security being given is has been squandered away or taken away, or false securities have been given. So I think reporting is not lacking. What they're saying is, please do an extra due diligence on this 50 crores and above, and then see if there is a possibility of a fraud. Because unless we find something totally out of place, there's no suspicion of a fraud. And otherwise, one will start becoming a policeman all the time rather than doing business.
Mr. Mittal, your closing comments as well. Do you think there is an underreporting of fraud by Indian banks which necessitated such action by the government?
No, I don't think so. There could always be some small discrepancies, but if any fraud has come to light of bank management, they are very well reported to RBI, which is the prescribed framework by the Reserve Bank of India. But let me give a comment here that we have this reporting for last many years. And something for everybody, government, banks and RBI, is very important to look at what happened to these fraud cases. How much money we have been able to recover? What was the root cause analysis? What were the process failures and have we corrected them out? Do we have a system that in future same fraud should not happen in any bank, particularly public sector bank I'm talking, in any public sector bank? Because the learning from one bank should be translated into implementation in all banks. So I think that is a huge database we have. And I do not think we have recovered the money or we have taken lessons on board for the public sector banks in that respect.
All right, Mr. Kannan and Mr. Mittal, thank you very much for joining us tonight on CNBC TV18. Really appreciate it.
Ritu, many thanks for taking us through that conversation. Meanwhile, as the PNB fraud gets bigger, murkier, it's feared to even damage the reputation of Indian banks globally. Earlier today, Lata Venkatesh asked Brian Moynihan, the chairman and CEO at the Bank of America, for his view on the fraud, and he admits that frauds do bring a cautious approach towards Indian banks, which is not good for the country. Lata also asked him about markets and whether 2018 will be a volatile year.
We've had these intermittent problems. First, the bad assets, which could accelerate a bit more. Right. And we've had this bank fraud from one of the banks. Would you worry about these things?
Well, I worry about all those things. I worry about and you're not unique. There are frauds that go on around the world, and our job as financial institutions to try to make sure we're doing the appropriate due diligence to understand them. And so I don't know the particular details of this one other than what I read in the paper and on your station. But, at the end of the day, our job is to do great due diligence on clients and customers and on correspondent banks. And I think, we'll continue to do that. But frauds are an unfortunate part of the business we're in. And what you want to do is do the work so that they happen few and far between. And when they do happen, they won't have a major impact on your company.
No, I mean, it's not a big fraud if you looked at the percentage. I mean, it's, I think, about 200 billion rupees for an industry that's over $1 trillion rupees. I mean, would you say that this is one-off, or what do your clients tell you? Are they worried about any part of Indian banking?
Well, I think everybody worries, and what will happen is the reaction to a situation like this, the couple situations have been in the paper, is everybody then sits back and is more careful with the banks involved and the quality of due diligence of what we do, and that tends to slow things down. And that's not good for a country like this country that needs capital and needs investment and needs velocity to grow an economy at 7.5%. Things have to happen, and if the banks around the world get worried about the amount of due diligence in terms of transactions and things like that, that is not good. But I think, like with everything, for a while, and then it'll kind of get to new normal and kind of work out from there.
Okay, so that was the Bank of America head on his perspective on the ripple effect of the PNB scam. But let's move over from the PNB issue to the big headline from the GST front. The revenue mop-up data for the month of January is out. The data basically shows that the GST collection up to the 20th of February stands at a little over 86,000 crore rupees. Now, that's almost equal to the collection during December 2017. Let me also quickly take you through the breakup of this January GST revenue that has been mopped up. While over 14,000 crore rupees has been collected as CGST, around 20,000 crore rupees has been collected as state GST, and around 44,000 crore rupees has come in as RGST. The rest has been collected as compensation cess. Meanwhile, a survey conducted by KPMG has come out with some interesting observations. First, the methodology. KPMG covered 232 senior executives with over 15 sectors and asked them what has and what has not worked for them after the implementation of the goods and services tax. So here are the top 3 findings of that very interesting survey. Number 1, majority of the respondents believe that the government is responding adequately to the industry's needs. However, 60% believe that GST officers need better training, and over 50% think that a better outreach program is the need of the hour. That's number 1. Number 2, and this is a grouse, a clear majority are of the opinion that they haven't gotten enough time to implement decisions taken by the GST Council. The solution? Better intimation practices and a feedback process from the traders. 34% also believe that the centre and the state should come out with notifications simultaneously. Number 3, the impact on pricing of products and services. More than 40% of the respondents believe that there hasn't been any significant impact on the pricing front. However, a significant 33% believe that there has been an uptick in this very regard. However, there is hardly any disagreement regarding the long-term impact of the tax reform. Look at your screens. An overwhelming 93% support the tax reform and consider that it will have an overall positive impact. So that is the big story as far as GST is concerned. But Ron, let's shift focus to the big global story of the day.
Well, global or not, we don't know, but clearly this is a story that should concern India. US President Donald Trump has raised once again the issue of high import duty on motorcycles in India for the second time alone this month. This despite the government lowering the duty from 75% on capacity above 1200cc to 50%. That was a 25% cut in import duties that was announced by the government. Trump said that the US was getting nothing from the reduction in duty, meaning US companies were still paying high tax for exporting to India, while Indian motorcycle companies were paying zero tax exporting to the US. Referring to his conversation with Indian Prime Minister Nirav Modi, this is what President Trump had to say.
India sells us a lot of motorbikes. So when they have a motorbike, a big number, by the way, they have a company that does a lot of business. So they have a motorcycle or a motorbike that comes into our country, the number is zero. We get zero. They get 100%. Brought down to 75, brought down now to 50. Okay. And I wasn't sure. He said it so beautifully. He's a beautiful man. And he said, I just want to inform you that we have reduced it to 75, but we have further reduced it to 50. And I said, what do I say? Am I supposed to be thrilled? And that's not good for you people, especially as governors. It's just not right.
But I can assure President Donald Trump that America does not make much out of import duties levied on Indian bikes, which he says is anyway 0%. It's not that they're losing out on much, because overall, less than 1% of Indian exports of motorcycles is to the US market. We have a negligible presence in that market. I think that is something that I'm hoping Donald Trump's advisors do give him that piece of statistic. Meanwhile, the bark from the US so far has been worse than the bite. Those are the words of former Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, Montek Singh Ahluwalia, when asked about tariff concerns raised by the United States. Montek had a simple advice for Donald Trump: go to the World Trade Organization and take up the issue.
If President Trump feels that we're doing something wrong, he should go to the WTO and seek the permission to do whatever is necessary to counter that. So far, frankly, the bark has been worse than the bite, because they haven't actually taken action against us in that area, but they keep threatening it. When people hear the United States uttering protectionist sentiments, it makes those who want to push protectionism look sensible and contemporary.
Now, sticking to this issue, Triumph India Managing Director Vimal Sombli also weighed in on the hot topic of the reduction in the custom duty. Speaking to CNBC TV18 at the launch of the company's latest offering, the Bonville Speedmaster, Sombli said that the reduction in custom duty to 50% from 75% is only for completely built units or CBUs, and the volume of these motorcycles isn't much. But manufacturers that assemble in India have been taxed higher, both as part of GST as well as the announcement in the new budget. He explains how the government's move is counterproductive for the sector.
What we thought as a direction of Government of India was to make in India. So a couple of years back, we thought make in India means first step is to assemble in India, make the segment large, and then probably manufacture in India. Right. So we changed our whole portfolio from to CKD or assembled in India. But we got twice hit, one on GST time when 3% was increased 500cc plus, and then in the recent budget announcement, they increased import duty by another 5.67%. Now, coming back to your question on CBU. So in India, the CBUs are bought by two routes. One is CBU through FTA, right, that is free trade agreement that you have with Thailand, and CBUs which are brought from rest of the world, right, that is US, UK, France, Italy, wherever. So they have bought the duty down of the CBUs from the rest of the world. Now that segment in India, according to the data which is available, if there are 100 motorcycles sold in the superbike segment, 10 or 15% of the bikes come in that segment.
Right.
So 85% of the bikes in this segment are today done CKD.
So basically bringing down the duty from 75% to 50% does not really have
Does
that,
not really
does
have
not
an
really
impact.
help you in any meaningful
Absolutely
manner.
doesn't help. And according to me, our understanding of ours is that the government of India wanted you to assemble in India, put infrastructure, put people, you get a recruitment. When you promote CBUs, it's almost like trading in India, right? You're trading only in India. There's no manpower really required. You're coming, bringing bikes and selling out.
So what would your suggestion be in this case? I mean, if the idea is to bring in more investment, to get bike makers, to get more people to come here, set up plants, employ more people, put in their investments, I mean, what is the right way to go about it?
If you look in our industry, if you look at the competition which is available in India, so everybody has taken a step of assembling, because as the first step you can take towards manufacturing.
Right.
So I think the government of India today should incentivize this niche segment, which is not large, to at least allow them to assemble in India, give them little incentive, then just trade in India. So my always suggestion, and that's what we have written to the Ministry of Finances, please relook into this custom duty increase. One side you have decreased CBUs, of course they were sitting on a very high price, but that segment is not large in India. But incentivize where people are investing in India by assembling in India.
Well, clearly luxury motorcycle makers also seeking a further reduction in the CKD duty, which, remember, had gone up in the budget. Time for us to slip into a break, but lots more lined up. Take a look.
I don't think that the transaction is not contingent on Warburg having a board seat.
What will Warburg Pincus do with its investments in Capital First once the MSME lender merges with IDFC Bank? An exclusive interaction with the top executives of the PE giant when we return. Welcome back to India Business Hour Plus. Warburg Pincus plans to remain invested in IDFC Bank after Capital First merges into the bank. And that's the word from top executives of the private equity giant, which is also the single largest shareholder in Capital First. In an exclusive chat with Nisha Poddar, the global co-CEO of Warburg Pincus, Charles Kay, and India head Vishal Mahadevia also said that with investments in Bharti DTH, the fund is hoping to relive the same Bharti magic they created with Airtel more than a decade back.
Bharti DTH in that sense is a play on that same theme, that rising consumption, access to high quality entertainment. You know, obviously it is, you know, special for the firm and for me to have the chance to work with Sunil again. He's someone that I got to know well in the late 1990s. He's always typified to me what is the true spirit of Indian entrepreneurship. And I think for both of us, we're going to try to see if we can find that magic again.
You've made some fair bit of investments. Let's start with Capital First. And that has seen a large transaction with merger of IDFC Bank and Capital First. And market understanding as per the merger swap ratio is that it is in favor of Capital First shareholders. Are you happy with that kind of a return? And what is your way forward in that investment?
Capital First is one we're quite proud of. We acquired control of it from the Future Group behind Vaidyanathan, really transformed the NBFC from a wholesale-oriented book to a very consumer SME lending one, built a really robust franchise. And in some ways, the opportunity now combined with IDFC Bank is the chance to take that to the next level. Chance to create a bigger platform, to essentially combine the strengths of both of the institutions and create something larger. And I'd say, you know, from an economy-wide point of view, India has need for more bigger financial institutions that can underpin its continuing economic growth.
Vishal, do you think that a board seat is something with 10% stake that Warburg Pincus will land up holding in the merged entity? Is that something that you're really looking at?
I don't think that the transaction is not contingent on Warburg having a board seat or anything. I would actually look at it, if I just step back, a couple of questions you asked. I think really you have two complementary businesses, and you had Vaidya and Rajiv on your channel and your show, and you grilled them already, so I don't want to repeat what they said. But to be honest, as Chip said, the opportunity to build something special, I think is fantastic. As we look at it, we want to be supportive shareholders, supportive investors, and for us, it's really a reinvestment decision.
Well, from one exclusive interview to an exclusive story now, the race to buy debt-laden Binani Cements is clearly heating up. Sources telling us now that a consortium of Dalmia, Bharat and Piramal have now emerged as the highest bidder to buy Binani Cement. For more on that story, Ritu Singh joins in with the latest on that. Ritu, so take us through what Dalmia has put on the table.
That's right. Dalmia Bharat, in a consortium with Piramal Bains India Resurgence Fund, has emerged as the highest bidder, or what banks call H1, as far as Binani Cement is concerned. This race was very closely fought. Aditya Birla promoted Ultratech Cement was also neck to neck with Dalmia Bharat when it came to the bids. Both of the players had bid anywhere between 62 to 6,300 crore rupees to acquire assets of Binani Cement, and we're talking about a 6.25 million ton, plant that Binani Cement has in Rajasthan. Of course, it also has a global presence as well, but we're talking about the India assets here. Now, do remember that there were several rounds of bidding for Binani Cement since it was taken to the NCLT last year by Bank of Baroda. Earlier, the bids had failed, and in the last round, IDBI Bank had also come in as a new lender in the consortium because of the corporate guarantee exposure that they had to the company. And with this fresh round of bidding, we understand in today's meeting, banks have declared Dalmia Bharat as the lead bidder, so negotiations will continue with them, and then the proposal will be taken to the NCLT for final clearance.
Okay, Ritu, thanks for taking us through that. But continuing with deals from insolvency space, and this is another story that Ritu was tracking, we learned from sources that Committee of Creditors has given its nod to Aeon and JSW Group to take over Monnet Ispat. Now, the JV will own 75% in company post the deal and could eventually merge with the JSW Group. That is at least in the long term, not immediately. JSW and Aeon have offered a package of about 3,700 crore rupees for this takeover, which basically means that financial creditors will have to take a total haircut of a good 76%. Now, here's shifting focus then to something that all of us need to know. Will we get better salary hikes? Or what will the average salary hike be in FY19? Macroeconomic forecast is showing some improvement globally, but your salary check will not get fatter this year. A survey by Aeon India shows that average salary hikes this year will be around 9.4%. This is just marginally higher than the 9.3% estimated last year. Compare this to 2007, when the average estimate was 15.4%. In fact, just last year, salary hike estimate dropped to single digits for the first time in a decade, and seems like it will stay that way this year as well. However, if you are a top performer in your company, then you can expect a salary hike of over 15%. This is nearly 2 times the pay increase of an average performer. The survey also points out that the bell curve is getting flatter with every passing year, but it also shows that there is a constant march towards ensuring higher differentiation. I caught up with Anandaroop Ghosh, the partner performance and rewards at Aeon India Consulting, and started by asking him, when can we expect salary hikes of 15.1%, that is the average salary hike of 15.1%, which we used to see in 2007?
I wish I could say next year, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case. I don't think we can see any significant upswing from where we are right now in the foreseeable future. So effectively what you're looking at, and like you pointed out, last year when we reported, same time when we reported these numbers, we were in a fairly difficult situation from an economic perspective. 1 year later, inflation is higher, GDP is looking better, there is no demonetization behind us. Yet we are looking at a situation where pay increase has only improved by 0.1%. And that's fundamentally because companies are choosing to be more financially prudent than respond to external economic conditions.
So, Anandaroop, even though the company is actually making money, does that mean that, so even though the company is actually making money gradually now, with the economy getting better, they are not really giving that to the employees? Is that what's coming out?
No, what they're actually saying is that they're giving it to the employees who really matter. And by that I mean employees, and like you also pointed out, employees who are defined as critical talent for a variety of things, or people who are identified as top performers. So top performers over the last few years are actually seeing higher and higher pay increases, while the average performer pay increases are gradually coming down. That's the difference.
Okay, Anandaroop, my issue over here is that the
what
top...
you're seeing...
Go ahead.
Sure. No, and I think what you're seeing is also the fact that attrition is coming down, right? I mean, that's the other part of it. You increase pay at a point of time when you start to realize that people are leaving the organization. Pay is a way to retain them. Over the last few years, attrition numbers have significantly come down, and that's why the pressure on companies to increase pay as a means to retain people also comes down.
Okay, fair enough. But, I want to discuss the point of, critical talent and the right people also. It's subjective in every organization. Why then have the bell curve at all, because you are specifically focusing on the higher performers. Why have the bell curve which leaves the good performers, perhaps not the best, but the good performers completely out of the actual salary increase net?
You see, India has, over the last 20 years that we have been tracking this, India has had a almost consistent 10% plus pay increases. So we are at a point where salary costs have become fairly non-competitive at a global level. That's at one level. At the other level is the fact that you are basically saying that India has always been a labor surplus but talent scarce economy. So there's availability of people to do your regular jobs. The challenge is in getting the right kind of talent to do the specialized job. With automation, with the changes that you're seeing in the world around with regard to the way the job creation is happening, there is sufficient number of people available to fill your necessary jobs. The challenge is in getting the right kind of people, and companies are willing to pay for that. But they're not willing to spend additional money for the general mass that is so easily available anyway, and which is also not leaving them right now. So there's no churn at that level.
Okay. The point on attrition that the survey points out, Anandrup, says that the reason why employees are actually leaving is because there aren't growth opportunities. So this is pretty much showing a trend that, companies aren't doing enough to ensure that employees remain motivated, the employee morale is taken care of, because the mass needs that, right? I mean, I agree that there is the top 10 performers, but then what happens to the other 90?
The other 90, it's not as if that other 90 are not important. It is that this other 90 is getting 9.5% pay increase, highest across Asia. One of the
but Anandrup, to be fair, that is also a lower base. More often than not, the mass is a lower base. The top performers usually, even your survey shows that the variable increase for the top management is so much higher, right? So if you're a lower base, 9.4% is barely anything.
I can understand the fact that one would feel very annoyed at the fact that why would year on year we still be in the 9% range, but it's an affordability question fundamentally. And what I started off with, that you cannot keep doing this kind of a pay increase year on year, while revenue, if you look at the last 6 years actually, the BSE 500 revenue average is about 9.5 to 11%. Broadly, the BSE 500 revenue growth CAGR has been 9.5 to 11%. Vis-a-vis that, if you keep increasing your compensation cost at 10% and above, what are you doing to profitability? And I'm sure shareholders will ask that question.
So that's what we can expect in the form of salary hikes come this year. Time for us to slip in another break. But up next, we tell you about the government's plan to now make Aadhaar linkage mandatory for driving licenses. Yes, you heard that right. We get you the details when we return. Welcome back. In order to weed out fake licenses, the central government is now planning to link driving licenses with Aadhaar numbers. CNBC TV18 now learns that the IT ministry is already in talks with the Roads Transport Ministry in order to fast-track the linkage. Ashmit Kumar brings us the story. Ashmit.
But even as the Supreme Court is hearing a batch of applications of petitions against the application of Aadhaar on a mandatory basis, we've learned from speaking from highly placed sources within the IT ministry that they at the same time are seeking a linkage of Aadhaar with one's driver's license, with your driver's license. That's not all. What IT ministry sources tell us is that the main agenda, the main intent behind this move is to make this linkage mandatory in nature. Keep in mind that various petitions are on that point itself on why there should be a mandatory linkage. Nonetheless, the IT ministry will be pushing forward for linkage on a mandatory basis. Another key aspect to be kept in mind is that this will be done on a pilot basis at first in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and that this will be fast-tracked. At least that's the intent behind as far as the IT ministry is concerned. And the one thing that needs to be kept in mind that this is just the first step, that after perhaps a successful implementation, the IT ministry as well as the roads ministry will be looking at introducing the linkage of Aadhaar with not just your DL or your driver's license, but also vehicle registration. As of right now, we understand that the roads ministry is considering this proposal having been mooted by the IT ministry and will decide on the course going forward. Back to you.
Okay, Ashwin, thanks for taking us through that. Now, here's one stock that's going to be in focus tomorrow. DLF, one of India's top real estate developers, is losing no opportunity from expanding its footprint in Haryana. The company's subsidiary has emerged as the largest bidder for an 11.8-acre land parcel owned by Haryana government in the Gurugram region. Timsy Japuria is here on the phone line with the details. Timsy, what exactly does this mean for the company? And help us put this into perspective as well. How large is this contract in terms of value?
Well, let me tell you, the contract value of this deal is quite big. That is around 1,500 odd crore rupees is what DLF will be selling for buying this land. And this was an e-auction by Haryana government, which after which DLF has emerged as the highest bidder, and they were it's about a 12-acre land in Gurugram at a very prime location, and that too, which will be used for commercial property development by DLF. And let me tell you, putting this deal into perspective, DLF has already sold part of its rental arm business to GIC, which is again which has the commercial assets, and now DLF will be adding another commercial asset, which will be apart from this deal of which it has already sold land to GIC. Now, selling to GIC meant to reduce debt on the books, and by buying this land, DLF will be adding some more debt to its book. But yes, it's a very prime land. Assets also get added in the asset side, and that's why DLF didn't want to leave this land, and that's how this is going to be another big commercial development. As you said, it's about a 12-acre huge land, about 2 million square feet is what we understand would be developed in terms of the actual footprint and the actual carpet area.
Okay, Timsy, thank you so much for taking us through those details. 1,500 crore rupees at that significant value, and that's a stock to watch for tomorrow.
US media giant Comcast has proposed a cash offer to buy pay TV service provider Sky for $31 billion. This offer from Comcast is as much higher than the offer put forth by Rupert Murdoch's 21st Century Fox. Comcast offered £12.5 per share for the company. This is almost 16% higher than Murdoch's offer. CNBC's Jeff Cutmore is standing by from outside in the Sky office in London. Jeff, tell us what makes this so significant.
Comcast is hardly a household name in the UK, but all that now looks set to change with this $31 billion bid for Sky. Brian Roberts, the head of Comcast, says this would be a very good match. Sky produces content, it has a digital platform where it distributes the internet, and it also has a news business. In many ways, it would be a perfect fit with America's Comcast. The trouble at this point, Rupert Murdoch has a very strong interest in perhaps raising his bid. Already, Murdoch's bid on the table at £10.75p. It can't compete with the current £12.50 being offered by Comcast, but of course he may come in with something significantly higher, and he has the advantage of already owning 39% of Sky. At this stage, the regulators here in the UK would probably see somebody other than Rupert Murdoch as favoured to take Sky. The analysts say the bid still undervalues the potential for this company, and as such they and the market think the money will go higher. For the time being, Sky putting out a bland statement effectively saying directors must understand their fiduciary rights towards shareholders, and they watch the bid with interest. This is Jeff Cutmore in West London at Sky.
Okay, Jeff, thank you so much for taking us through those details. So perhaps Rupert Murdoch could come up with a counter bid. We'll stay tuned to that. But let's quickly take a look at how Wall Street is faring today. It's yet another volatile session for U.S. equity, and that too on a day when U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has downplayed the concerns over recent market volatility. In his first appearance before the U.S. Congress, Powell has indicated that the Fed plans to hike rates 3 times this year and may be inclined to a fourth. Listen in.
These interest rate and balance sheet actions reflect the committee's view that gradually reducing monetary policy accommodation will sustain a strong labor market while fostering a return of inflation to 2%. engaging the appropriate path for monetary policy over the next few years. The FOMC will continue to strike a balance between avoiding an overheated economy and bringing PCE price inflation to 2% on a sustained basis.
All right, with that, we got to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Many thanks for watching from all of us here. Good night. We'll be back tomorrow, same time.